Maple Hollow was the kind of neighborhood that looked like it belonged in a brochure. Quiet, tree-lined streets, laughter echoing from backyards, and the smell of barbecues in the summer air. The kind of place where no one locked their doors, because no one ever had a reason to. And then there was Harold Quinn. He lived alone at the end of Elmrose Drive, in a modest one-story house with a white picket fence and rose bushes he tended to like a ritual. Harold was 63, retired from teaching high school history, and had a warm, grandfatherly air that people naturally gravitated toward. He brought cookies to HOA meetings, remembered everyone's birthdays, and even cleared snow from his neighbors' driveways in the winter, unasked. To everyone in Maple Hollow, Harold was the neighbor you bragged about having. But if someone had looked just a little closer, they might have noticed something strange. Not wrong, not at first, just strange. It started with a smell, subtle at first, like rotting meat maybe. Most people assumed it was coming from the compost pile Harold kept behind his garage. He was a gardener, after all. But the smell lingered. It got worse. Still, no one questioned it. Until Luke Mason went missing. Luke was 17, a junior at Brookview High, and he disappeared on a Tuesday afternoon. He had taken his usual bike route, the same one he rode every day after school, and never made it home. His mother, Anna, was the first to panic. The police, as always, started slow. Maybe he ran away. Let's give it 24 hours. But Anna knew her son. She knocked on every door in the neighborhood. When she reached Harold's, he opened the door in his usual soft cardigan, smiled politely, and listened as she explained. "I'm sorry, Anna," he said gently. "I haven't seen the boy. I really hope he turns up soon." But Anna noticed something she couldn't shake. Harold's fingernails, usually neat and clean, were caked with dirt. Not the kind of dirt you get from trimming roses. The kind you get from digging. Her stomach twisted. She told the police. They knocked on Harold's door the next morning. First, there was nothing. Harold let them in, offered them tea, cooperated completely. His house was spotless. His smile never wavered. But when they brought in a cadaver dog, everything changed. The dog stopped at the garden behind the house. The roses, bright blood red, were planted in unusually soft soil. Officers requested a warrant. They began to dig. What they uncovered would shake the quiet town to its core. Wrapped in plastic tarps were 3 human bodies, all male, all teenagers, all buried beneath Harold's prized roses. One of them was Luke Mason. The other 2 were Michael Thurman, who had vanished in 2004, and Jay Patel, missing since 2009. None of them were connected, not on paper, not at first glance. But Harold had lived in each of their neighborhoods once, quietly, without drawing attention. He had moved from town to town, always keeping to the same pattern. Make friends, gain trust, disappear, and bury the past behind a garden. When they searched the rest of the property, the real horror unfolded. In the attic, tucked away in an old cedar chest, they found a collection of trophies. A child's blood-stained shoe, a diary belonging to a girl named Abby who'd gone missing in 1997, and dozens of Polaroids. Each photo showed a smiling child, different kids, different houses, all posing in front of the places Harold had once lived. It was as if he had been documenting something, or someone. When police finally sat him down at the station, Harold said almost nothing. Until, out of nowhere, he leaned in, looked directly at the officer across from him, and whispered, "I was just keeping them safe from their parents." As chilling as that was, the biggest twist came later. DNA confirmed one of the bodies, Michael Thurman, had already been officially declared dead in 2005. His father had gone to prison for his murder. But if Michael's body was buried in Harold Quinn's garden, then who did they bury 20 years ago? And what else had Harold been hiding? Michael Thurman had been declared dead 20 years ago. His father, Calvin Thurman, was convicted for his murder in 2005. There was a confession. There was a grave. But DNA didn't lie. The body buried in Harold's backyard was Michael. So who was buried in the original grave? Authorities exhumed the coffin, and what they found was disturbing. The remains of a different boy, never identified, from a different state. That boy was Jeremy Dell, 15, missing since 2003 in Indiana. How he ended up buried in suburban Illinois under Michael's name remained a mystery. But one thing was now clear. Calvin Thurman hadn't killed his son. He had confessed to a crime he didn't commit. Pressured, overwhelmed, broken by grief and interrogation tactics, he'd folded. And now he'd spent nearly 2 decades behind bars for it. Harold had framed him, just like he had likely framed others. Investigators began piecing together Harold's past. Over 30 years, Harold Quinn had moved across 6 states, living in 15 different neighborhoods. In nearly every place, a child had gone missing. Most were never found. Some had been misidentified. A few parents, like Calvin, had been arrested. Others had their lives destroyed by rumors and grief. Harold's pattern was subtle but surgical. He embedded himself in communities, gained trust, waited, and then removed a child under the guise of rescue. A disturbing fantasy that he repeated over and over again. In his attic, they found Polaroids, each one showing children smiling on doorsteps. Their names are still being matched to open cases. One photo had a note on the back. Safe now. Harold wasn't just a killer. He saw himself as a savior, a twisted protector from a world only he thought he understood. In a locked storage container Harold had kept in a remote Montana property, authorities discovered journals spanning 2 decades. He had written everything: methods, names, thoughts, justifications. "I give them peace," one entry read. "I see what their parents won't. They don't scream if you're gentle." There were no signs of prolonged torture, no sadism, only quiet, calculated murder, often by poisoning or suffocation. In one of the final journals, he wrote, "I don't kill, I deliver, I fix what others break." That line sent chills through the investigators. And then came the most disturbing part of all, a list of names. Some had check marks beside them, others did not. At his arraignment, Harold Quinn pleaded not guilty to all charges. He refused to speak, refused to testify. But the evidence was overwhelming. DNA, journal entries, photographs, bodies. The trial lasted 11 weeks. It took the jury less than 3 hours to convict him on multiple counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. He was sentenced to 8 consecutive life terms without parole. Harold Quinn died in prison less than a year later. A heart attack in his sleep. He was 64. To the end, he never expressed remorse, never apologized, never revealed how many children he'd truly taken. In the aftermath, Calvin Thurman was exonerated, released quietly, no press, no apology, just freedom after 19 years. "I lost my son twice," he said in a rare interview. First to Harold, then to a system that believed him. Maple Hollow eventually tried to move on. The rose garden at the Quinn house was dug up, salted. Nothing grows there now. And the rest of the country? It watched and learned, because Harold Quinn didn't look like a monster. He looked like a friend, a mentor, a neighbor. But behind every perfect smile, there might be a garden no one's ever dared to dig.